Hello, everyone. This is Auto Asphyxiation. This is Lark.
And Kimberly.
That's right. And we are here. Actually, we had a pretty good weekend. We had an exciting time. We saw Wicked,
Yes.
and really, we're going to talk about the wickedness of car propaganda. Let's first, I want to talk about sprawlism because I felt, our main site is called sprawlism, and people are probably what does that mean? And so I'm going to read the definition of sprawlism. Sprawlism is the ideological weaponry of moving people and disrupting nature through hierarchical oppressions, racism, sexism, classism, etc., all in the service to capital. It results in environmental degradation and the consolidation of power for hegemony. More technically, it is the institutional process of externalizing your CO2 emissions and negative externalities beyond your political boundaries while ensuring the financial benefits remain securely within. In Oz, rather than the railroad, they used a yellow brick road, a glittering infrastructure project built with enslaved labor. But also, like in a lot of ways, I kind of like think about like propaganda and how it shapes how we are. And I think about it now, you're in a situation where I remember I used to always say people are car free. And I was very, I think I wouldn't call it flippant about it. Because when you are car free or do not have a car in the United States, it can be a really challenging and kind of scary thing. Do you want to talk about this a little bit, Kimberly?
Well, I am facing a situation where I'm probably going to have to turn in my own car, and that's going to limit what I can do in my town. Like even within my town, I can't get to my doctor without a car. I can't get to a proper grocery store without a car. I can run to a bodega, but bodegas only like fill in the gaps. They don't really serve you like a full-on grocery store will. And it is daunting to think about what my life is going to be like without a car in an area where the public transportation isn't as robust as I would like it to be.
And the reason why it's not as robust is because in generally the whole idea is you're going to New York. And not only that, you're a man going to New York. We live in an area, we live in the New York metro area in a place called New Jersey or in North Jersey, but the transportation is made for men in mind. Essentially, car propaganda is like shaped as freedom and mobility. You could go wherever you want to go, but this is not, but it's also shaped as a masculine thing. And it has ignored people who don't go into Manhattan, who don't make $250,000 a year, which is not unusual for people in the North Jersey area to make over a quarter million men specifically to make over $250,000 a year working in Manhattan. So a lot of times I know of a lot of women who don't have access to a car, so they're literally at home. Um, but the bus, public transit, how are we doing like trips to like go to the grocery store, go to the doctor, pick up children, but you don't even have a child, and still this is going to be challenging for you.
Yeah, well, I have pets that I'm going to have to get to a vet eventually, like for their checkups and whatnot. And that's, a whole nother thing. Like I'll have to get a ride share and I'll have to get a pet friendly ride share and so on and so forth, like, and when we talk about car propaganda, like I think about when the US highway system was first put in place and it was done as a military project. And I think about the car propaganda going back to the late 40s and the early 50s, where it was the promise of freedom that you could do anything, you could go anywhere, and you will be a better man, a better mom, a better dog owner if you have this car. That's all what it says.
And I think about, the yellow brick road. It's kind of like the highway. I mean, it's kind of like if once you get on that highway, get on that road, you can kind of like go to your future and get all your desires met. And it's like this magic hides the exploitation behind this so-called yellow brick road or this freedom or this magic that doesn't really exist. Well, the thing is that it does exist, but not the way you think it is. I mean, it kind of like it erases, it erases the labor that we do, that people who are not cisgender men do to keep our society going. And I mean, this is as far as even on the left, who does the organizing, like planning the meeting? Who plans for the food? Who plans for the space? Who calls people and emails them and tells them to come out? Whereas, who are the people who are the ones who are speaking? Who are the ones that get the press or write the op-eds? Who gets to do that? And it's like the car, the road, the propaganda behind it all hides the work of the worker, or just like depending on the hierarchy, who was ever on the bottom, they're essentially disappeared. And it's weird how, it's the car itself, it reproduces hierarchical oppressions and like racism, classism, sexism, and I kind of think about, within Wicked, you think about um essentially, where how people were getting around. Now, the two people who had some power, Glinda, she had a bubble, which is symbolic of many things, but also Alphaba had a broom, and it's kind of like they both had their ability to go places. But if you think about one of the characters, and I kind of just thinking about this, Bach, he got trapped because he didn't have a broom. He didn't have a bubble. He had the train and he wasn't allowed to get on the train. And this
Yep.
is kind of mirrors the way in which power controls us by kind of going, oh, if you want to be free, you need to have your own personal vehicle. But if you're not going to be free, but the thing is that we're I know it's kind of weird that we're bringing into it, but was Glinda free in her bubble? Was Alphaba free on her broom? Even though, what would have really been free is that, when they were in, if you think about in the first Wicket, how they were able to get on the train and like go and like just go when they needed to. And then, this is, I mean, people think, oh, this is weird, but it's not a really a weird thing, the way to think about it. It's all part of the propaganda of, oh, if you have a car, you're free.
And, also like when we think of like highways and sprawl and everything like that, and we think of like the journey to the big city that you take on the yellow brick road, it's a grand adventure. We're all going like, let's go. Workers were exploited to make those roadways, and families are sold a dream wrapped in suburban fantasy, saying safety, clean air, so on and so forth. But our cities can be like that too if we make our cities more friendly to everybody.
That's the whole thing too, because even if we go to the books, the original books by Oz, I think there's 26 books. I'm not quite sure, but I think there's 26 books. And essentially everything that you need is in the kind of the capital city of Oz. It's in the capital city. And everybody else is kind of like they don't have access to things. But you can't, but I remember in the book, they're like, well, everyone can't live in Oz because then it would get too crowded. So you had to be like of the privileged group to be able to live there. You could visit, but you could only special people could live there. And this is something I always thought about with the 15-minute city. Like, how do we prevent a situation where we're like Oz, where only certain people get to have a 15-minute city. Only people who have access to the money and power, or essentially their fathers or brothers or husbands or power, get to go to Oz. What about these? And it's kind of like with Manhattan. Who gets to live in Manhattan? And where does everybody else live? And like, we don't really think about this, because if you get divorced and you're a woman, or you never get married and you're a woman, what happens to people when they're no longer able to afford to live in Oz? You're just thrown out into some weird exurb kind of an area, and it's like we don't even think about what, if we think about it, really North Jersey is a metro area, it's an urban area, but it does not have the public transit because it's like still pretending that it's just a regular suburb. It's not. People live here, lots of people live here.
Yes, no, lots of people do live here, and it's ridiculous to treat us. We're treated as a suburb of New York City in North Jersey, and we're not. We're our own thriving place, and we need our own public transportation that gets us from point A to point B within New Jersey without having to take a car at some point in that journey.
Well, and this is the thing, that it's just like if Brooklyn is a city, if Queens is a city, then North Jersey certainly is a city. And this whole idea that we should have to drive out here with our car, it is truly, the namesake of the show, auto asphyxiation. It's almost like, why are we actually suffocating ourselves, killing ourselves, loving loving our chains, like in Wicked, the cowardly lion, he's like, I want to be like, kind of, he's not saying he want to be in a car, but I want to be enslaved. I wanted to be in that cage. Like that's what I want. Like, do we really want to be in the car? I mean, and here, the thing about the car is this. It's not just I'm in the car and I have to use it. I have to pay for the car. Okay.
It,
So not only is it like the the climate disaster that it causes, and also the separation between you and humanity, like this antisocial behavior that it encourages. But it's also a burden in regards to your economics. Not, once you finish the car payment, then you got to do insurance. Then you have to worry about people hitting you. Then you have to worry about buying gasoline. I mean, it becomes an endless, amount of a drain on your wallet. And it's kind of like paying for porn. Like, you're addicted to this. You cannot stop because, well, what do you like? You're like, what? Why I have to? I just have to. I mean, and this is literally why we call this show auto asphyxiation, because it's like this it's like this kink that we can't get off of in New Jersey, and it doesn't need to be that way. We could have a healthy relationship. Well, not saying that kink is not unhealthy, but it's like if you're letting it drive your life, it becomes an addiction. Then it becomes a problem. It's kind of like, I'm trying to say that keep this all clean and not drop in some casual weird reference. But that's anyway, you want to say something?
well, I'm thinking about like the car culture that we have in the United States and how it coerces us to believe that being chained to the wheels of our car is freedom. But really, I want to ask you, if you think that having a car is freedom, what can you do without a car? What in your daily life can you accomplish without having to get into a car? Can you run your errands? Can you go to the grocery store? Can you go to the doctor? Can you pick up your children? Can you get your kids to school or extracurricular activities without a car? If you are answering no to these questions, then is your car really giving you freedom?
That's a really good point, because you're not free anymore if you have to have this in order for you. It's not like, oh, okay, it's a fun thing like having a scooter. And okay, a scooter that you don't have to rely on to get to point A to point B. But this is a really good point. If you have to use it, it's not really freedom. At this point, it's something much different. And I think that this is something we need to really free ourselves of when we are discussing transportation, and discussing like how we should be essentially, we really need to think about our budget, and think about, we have a transportation funding, and we need to think about how do we want to spend this transportation funding in New Jersey? Do we want can we vote on this? Kind of like we have, like people are kind of talk about ranked choice voting. What about participatory budgeting? We should be doing participatory budgeting with our transportation because I feel that so many people in New Jersey actually, they either don't drive or they are sharing a car in a household. Wouldn't it be wonderful if, we had a light rail on Bloomfield Avenue, which I think is, like, I know I've talked about this before. It's just as reasonable as having a greenway. What if we had, extended the light rail in Bergen County or extended the Hudson, which they are doing it. They're you and I go to the doctor. We don't go to well, I do go to the doctor in Manhattan, but there are people who go to the doctor in New Jersey. There are people who when you get your groceries, like, people those people have to work and live somewhere. And they probably live in New Jersey because I can't see you living in Manhattan and then coming here to work at Starbucks. I can't really see that being a thing. Even though we're boycotting Starbucks, and New Jersey has wonderful coffee shops. Let's name them off: Java Love, um, Erie Coffee and Bakery. Don't mean that. Oh, Sankofa Coffee Shop. Just naming all these people because I don't want to, like, whatever. We don't even have to do that. But I think that this is something that we don't really think about in regards to um our options. We are essentially allowing the car to run how we to plan our lives. And it's so much propaganda, like you said, so much propaganda that it doesn't free women, it doesn't free people. It's an illusion, just like the wizard. But yet we say it's an illusion, but it causes material harm. It's not like, it's kind of like we say, and that I think that's why sometimes now when I say car free, I say that with like a caveat, with an asterisk, because I don't want to minimize the fact that not having a car can be devastating because of the way our infrastructure is. And I think that if I minimize when we minimize the fact that the infrastructure here is not conducive to especially people who live in our hyper segregated communities, such as you live in a hyper segregated community. Um, and by hyper segregated, what I'm meaning, listeners, is typically in on the East Coast and the West Coast, African American communities are hyper segregated, meaning that they are social. There are is from Douglas Massey, and it means that they are like seven areas that people are isolated, which is like social, economic, education. There are like it's like several bands of isolation. And the infrastructure, denial of infrastructure, and the defunding and just the denial of infrastructure is part of that hyper segregation. And even though Kimberly is white, living in this neighborhood, she's still impacted by it. Kind of like how the cameras, that when they were doing like cameras, they were like saying, "Oh, it's not race, it's not biased in regards to race, but it was biased because if it was a neighborhood that was traditionally or historically African American, even if you're white, you went through it, you would get a ticket." So it's kind of like this. People always think when people are saying like, okay, a neighborhood is like distressed, it means like, oh, if you're white and you went there, you wouldn't have any problems. Like it's not like it's literally the physical space that is the problem. It's not the actual person. Well, I think this is kind of like this kind of goes to a conversation we were having online where you name the oppression, not the person, which I think in a way is really good because you can really see how, no, we're not naming, it's not the problem that, essentially that Kimberly lives here, or the problem that the people who live there are black. The problem is that we created this infrastructure where we're oppressing people in this area, which results in this amazing harm. And where's weird kind of goes to our next topic of the racial politics of car infrastructure. You have a situation where you don't have public transit, and then you have these predatory loans now that are going around for used cars. We have predatory, and I bring this up all the time because I think it's so awful that they have subprime loans for used cars for people who literally need a car to get to work.
That's another thing too, is that like there's so many, so like if you're not one of the elite that can afford a high car payment. Like I bought a used car and my car payment, because my credit isn't great, my car payment is very high and not really affordable to me. So if you're not one of those elite people that can afford a brand new top of the line vehicle, hasn't been driven more than like 5 miles when you buy it, what happens to the rest of us? We have to buy subpar cars that are potentially a danger on the highway and just kind of make do with that. That's not acceptable.
And I have a question, and you don't have to answer this, but how much is your car payment?
$568 a month for a
That's
used car.
that's like wild.
Yeah.
$500 for a used car.
And
This
I,
is
I
this is go ahead.
I didn't put the I when I first bought it, like there was some confusion and they didn't take my full down payment that I had. So that does play into part of the reason why it's a really expensive car loan. But still, it's just like it's ridiculous.
No, it's ridiculous. And this is the thing, we don't really talk about this kind of stuff. We don't talk about how much it costs to be how much more it costs to be a woman and to be alive. We don't get paid the same amount of money. You know, you can't necessarily like just get on your bike and just ride around. You're a nurse, you work at night. You work, odd hours, you work 16-hour days. So this whole like, oh, well, you could just go and work in the middle of the night. You could ride your bike, and the way the streets are set up in East Orange, you almost feel like you're gonna get hit if you're walking around there like all the time. There's no crosswalks. And I want people to know this is not about the current administration there. I'm not talking about the mayor, whatever. This has been there way before, way
Yeah.
before this how this infrastructure is set up was set up by someone else. And Essex, we because we have this, and I always say it the wrong way. I call it like local control, but what's the term? What's that term they use out here?
Um, home, is it home
Home rule,
rule?
home
Yeah.
rule, home rule. But I don't, in some ways I don't like that term because people outside the area are not going to quite understand what home rule means. Like it's obvious if you're in New Jersey or even on the East Coast, but in California or people who are listening to from in other places or other countries, they were like, "What do you mean by home rule?" And what we mean by home rule is in New Jersey, and I always say it's like state rights, but pretend like you're not in the United States and you don't know what states' rights mean. It means that every single city runs like its own, like their own private government. So essentially, if whatever district, imagine a place like London. Imagine if London only paid for its schools, its fire department, its police department, and it didn't share with other places. Essentially, all public schools were funded through London housing. And essentially, if you wanted to run a train through that area, the greater London area, each town in that greater London area would have to approve the stop. So it's not like so everything you do becomes really very bureaucratic, like laden, lots of red tape. This is another reason why I really have a problem with so much of our social capital being spent on the Greenway because of home rule. This is going to mean that each city that it goes through has to vote on if it's okay. And we all know that is going to take for bloody ever. How long did it take to get even a stop sign in Montclair? Like
Claire.
30 years.
Yeah.
So imagine a bike lane in a bike lane. It's just going to be ridiculous. And it's harmful. Like it's just so very harmful. It really makes me scared sometimes that you're like having to go places at night, like even like in your car, because I know your car is not even like the most, it's your car's a little shaky.
I know.
A little
I
bit
know it
it's a
is.
little bit like,
I,
oh, does it work? I don't know, and I think that, it's weird. It's like this kind of like, if you resist the car, like say you resist it and you try to like, okay, I don't, and I did this. I tried to be car free um when I was in Los Angeles. And, people, I remember people would ask, in Los Angeles, they'll ask you, do you have a car? If you have a job. And, they probably even do this in New Jersey. They ask, do you have a car? If you're looking for jobs.
that's actually a legal question to ask. You can ask if they have reliable transportation, but you're not supposed to ask directly what kind of transportation it is.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. That's good
Yeah.
to know. Is that illegal everywhere, or is that just illegal in New Jersey?
As far as I know, when I was a manager for Starbucks, they went by California's employment laws because California's employment laws were the strictest in the country. But as far as I know, according to Human Resources in New Jersey, you should not be asking that question. You have to word it differently. You have to ask if they have reliable transportation.
Yeah. And maybe, maybe I said that in my head, but, anyway, but I think, yeah, but I'm just saying there was an expectation that you had a car when you were in Los Angeles. So, I mean, this was something that I noticed. And also, I just remember just being harassed by not just, I wasn't harassed just by people, like regular people or regular dudes on the street. I was harassed by the police department. I bring this up a lot. I was harassed by the police department for being at the bus stop um in the morning, because the thing about, if you take public transit, you have to often be up early in the morning or very late at night, because the buses run in a weird way. In order to be on time, you have to, essentially, if you're going to be at work at 8 o'clock, because a lot of times, especially jobs that are women dominated, we are the ones that, we are the planners. We're the ones that do the coffee. We're the ones that set things up before everybody else gets there. So that means we have to be there. If your job starts at 9, that means we typically have to be there at 8, which means we actually have to be at the bus stop. If we don't have kids, if we don't have a car, we don't have kids 6 o'clock. If you do have kids, 5 o'clock, because you have to drop your kids off at childcare. Um, so this is not, this is these are, if you decide, no, I'm not going to do this, you will be viewed as an outcast. And I mean, this is part, and this is, I think about, Alphaba's character. She refused to use her magic for evil. She stood up for things. She stood up, like, and especially too, if you're making it seem like you're doing this as a choice. That's another thing I think is really interesting. When I was car free, I felt like power hegemony really wanted to make it seem like I wasn't doing it by choice, like I had to do it, like it was something that I had to do, because me doing it by choice was like powerful to them. Like
Yeah.
me saying I'm not doing this, especially as a black woman. I thought it was really interesting that I used to have a public transit oriented blog where I talked about buses and bicycles, and I was doing original reporting and I was doing original videos. And this was like back in the aughts, right? So this is like, took me a long time to do the video editing and do the original reporting. And essentially everybody who was part of, who were my comrades, all my peers all got picked up. They weren't black. Because it was very much like, oh, look, of course you're black and you don't have public transit. So no big deal. That's not really doing anything. It wasn't viewed as being like a radical. And they really, tried to make it seem like this was something I had to do rather than something that I wanted to do. And I think this is the same thing with Alphabet. It was this viewed like, well, you're choosing not to do this. And so essentially they're like, yeah, we hate her. That's why it's not because she's choosing to not do band magic with us, it's because we hate her, she hates us, and she's evil, and it's so bad, it's horrible that she's so evil that we have to like banish her.
Yes, and then we have our manufactured crisis.
Exactly, you do. You have this this is kind of like what's happening. It's I think about every time you try to talk about bicycles or one tries to talk about buses or public transit and essentially making it so that or not, or essentially getting rid of parking mandates. People are like, but what about people who are poor who need to use their cars to get to work? And I was like, you know what? That narrative's about to be done because people having cars, just generally like working class people, poor people, that's about to be over. Because it costs too much to have the whole idea of having a car. That's just wild. That's not going to happen now.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think that I think that a lot of people are with the inflation and how expensive groceries and gas is and our power bills, I think that people are really making some hard decisions for themselves and deciding that maybe a car is more of a burden than the ticket to freedom. I mean, like me, I'm looking at I my car payment is 568 a month, and then on top of that, of course, you have insurance, and because my car is financed, it has to have insurance to the gills. So that's another almost $300 a month, and then on top of that, I rent a garage. I'm not giving exact numbers. It's much less than $300, but I'm rounding up a little bit. And then, of course, my garage rent, which is another $275 a month. Like, that's so, like, getting rid of a car for me is going to free up almost $1,000 a month for me to put towards rent and groceries.
But that is just astronomical. It really is. That's astronomical. And this
Uh,
is the kind of choices that people have to make all the time. And people are not going to be able to make this choice. This is not going to be an option. It's not going to even be like, well, I can swing it. The car right now where we are on the game board, it is not going to be an option for people. And the fact that people who are whether you're anti-war, social justice oriented, or you care about the environment, if you are not making public transit, bicycles, and micro mobility your focus, you are contributing to harm. You're contributing to the war machine. You're contributing to the climate crisis. You're contributing to people not having housing and homes. I know so many people who became homeless behind their car. And this is a very popular story in California, and it's about to be a popular story in New Jersey. What would happen? And I'm so glad that you are able to make this choice because at least you don't live in like too far out in the middle of nowhere. But I know people, this is what they do, especially in California. They have a car and they lose their job. Something happens, something bad happens, and they make the decision to live in their car because you can't drive your apartment to work. So they choose to keep their car until they find a job. They'll live in their car, hoping that they find a job or their job somehow pays more money. They have this and then something happens, either a car crash accident or they get towed and they go and they become homeless. This has been the route for so many people to end up on the street because they're trying to keep this car so they can get to work. So if the whole argument is we need to be able to like make sure we have parking so people can get to work who don't have any money, you don't really care because people are dying, literally dying on the street, economically killing themselves so that they can, because of the way this infrastructure is so horrible, and they can't even do it. They're failing at trying to keep this little piece of car. They're failing at it. And I don't think people who've been middle class their entire life or who live in like Manhattan proper understand how horrible this is.
I don't think that they do. And I know so many people that either live out of their cars or have done like that van life thing, so that they can, move around rent free, whatnot. I've known so many people in my age group. It's not even young people, it's in our age group that have at some point in time lived out of their car.
Yeah, this is where we're at, where essentially, oh, instead of fighting for housing, we're fighting so that people can park their car in an area that has a shower. Um, this is where we are in the United States, where we think it's more important for people to have a car so they can get to work than for people to have housing.
Isn't Wouldn't you say that a car in that way then is like an illusion, much in the same way that the wizard's power is an illusion? Like the power that you have with a car is an illusion of power. Because if you need to live out of it so that you can get to work, and that's your sole purpose for essentially becoming homeless so that you can keep paying for your car, what power do you really have? You don't have anything. The car has all of the power over you, and it's not even a living thing.
And I feel like in a way that's a story that needs to be told. The story of the person who like literally almost, essentially die. And I know some people who not only that, I know people who literally die behind trying to keep their car because that's literally what happens. At the end, they typically die. That's what typically happens to these people. These people die. And I don't know, what people don't I don't think people have really have grasped the kind of connection. And there are so many, like, this invisible hand of the market, the invisible hand is propaganda. I think this is something that people need to grasp. The invisible hand, whether it's, the material harm, whether, even though Adam Smith actually never used the term invisible hand, even though people always accredit it to him, he never, if you read his books, he never actually said that. And we need to like we need to tell in a way, there's so many horror stories in regards to bicycles. We need to tell the horror stories of the car, all these horrible things that happen to people behind the fact that they had to have a car. And we want to have positive, uplifting stories about bicycling, but I think also we don't tell enough horror stories about what happens to people trying to keep their car, especially working class and poor people, and all the horrible things that they do and go through, and the stress, them towing your car, you having to pay for something, you ending up in jail behind tickets on your car. In New
Exactly.
Jersey, you can go to jail because you didn't pay tickets, parking tickets, not speeding tickets. You can go to jail for parking tickets in New Jersey. I thought that was wild. When I found that out, I'm like, what? You can go to
They
jail for parking tickets out
they
here?
will suspend your license for parking tickets and not tell you for 2 weeks. So by the time that you get told, you've already been pulled over and have to go to court for it. Like I've seen it happen like a million times to people. It's a scam.
It is diabolical. And the thing is that where you're going to get these tickets at are going to be in hyper segregated communities. You're going to get these tickets in Newark, in East Orange, in Irvington. This is where you're going to get tickets in places where people already don't have enough money to live, in places where tracks where people, put it this way, most people don't have a car. But the people who do have a car, they're in such precarious situations because the medium household in some tracks, not every track, but in some tracks in Newark, is $16,000 a year. This is in 2024. Okay. So this is horrific. And I
That's
don't think
below poverty levels. That's well below poverty levels.
I don't know, and it's sad. It's a sad situation because this shouldn't happen. People in South Newark should be able to have as much public transit, like as much yeah, a much public transit access as people who live in Central New Jersey, Central sorry, Center City, Newark, or downtown Newark. They don't call it downtown Newark. Or even like myself, the fact that I have so much public transit around me and then other people have nothing. Like, how is this? I mean, it's like, oh, we don't want to extend it because we don't want to share. We don't want to share our public transit with somebody who are not the kind of people that we, or even, let's be honest, we don't want to share public transit with Black people.
Well,
So essentially, go
well,
ahead.
look, we've often told our listeners that we live about a mile apart. And the difference is because we live a mile apart, we're in different cities in Essex County, and it's night and day difference. You have so many transit options right next to you that you can walk to or ride your bike to. And I'm here and like if I want to get to the train station, I have to take like two buses to get there.
I'm by a light rail, heavy rail. I also have the 28 bus, which takes you right to the airport. I mean, to me, to me, it's just wild to me that I have all of these transit options, and then you go a mile up, nothing. How does this happen? And I mean, we already know what happened. It's
We
by
know what
design.
happened.
We know
Yeah.
what happened. It's by design. And so, I just think about even in during trick or treating during Halloween, like some of my neighbors were like, "Oh, we don't want to give candy to the kids from the other side of Wassessing. Like literally the lines right there. We don't want to give candy to them because those aren't our kind of kids. Get out of here.
They're
And
kids.
they're kids, and it's the same thing with public transit. We don't want, and that's the thing about another thing in North Jersey they used to have, but they used to have these private commuter buses that were only kind of like on a need to know basis. Only certain people got to know about them. And it was like you had to have a private way into Manhattan. A lot of during COVID, all these things fell apart. And I think in my head, I know they were getting subsidized with tax dollars. They're getting subsidized with tax dollars to have essentially a separate but equal public transit system, and money they could have been spending to extend the light rail into East Orange,
Yep.
reactivating the heavy rail to East Orange. Rather than do that, they would rather essentially have private buses for people in the suburbs in this little bitty city. I mean, Essex, I call it, sorry, Essex is a city. And and it's just ridiculous. We have all this stuff set up so that we can continue segregation. That's why Montclair is missing millions of dollars, but East Orange, working class Black, also missing millions of dollars. But it's kind of like, it's so funny how when it happened to East Orange, oh, those people were incompetent. And when it happened to Montclair, it's like, well, the people that those people, it's still those people. It's like weird. It's ends up being the same, those people in quotations, whether
Yeah.
it's Montclair or East Orange. It's essentially everything that happens in New Jersey, they're like, it's Black people's fault. And that's kind of a silent part. And it's kind of irritating because everyone's like acting like, oh, we're not saying that. You clearly are. And that we're kind of going off topic now, but I mean, this is all kind of connected. It's all kind of the
It does all
propaganda,
connect.
the lies, the not concerned about women. They're not concerned about the racialized aspect of it. And this is all the things that are the reason why we don't have good, robust intra public transit. We have excellent public transit into Manhattan. I feel like
Yes.
I'm closer to Manhattan than people in Brooklyn. I could get to Manhattan. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, I really my house should really be worth way more money because I can get there before. If you're living in Brooklyn or Queens, I'm going to get to Manhattan before you.
Yes. Yeah. But I can't get to your house and you can't get to mine.
Exactly. And that to me is kind of wild. And with that, we're gonna wrap it up. And please subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your council people.
Tell your council people. Go to your town council meetings.
Yeah, town council meeting and your town planning meetings,
Those
because
two.
those are very important. Because you know, well, it doesn't matter, but we'll talk about it later. All right. With that, you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for listening.